Who knew that the Slim Jim guy was such a metalhead?
Step into a Slim Jim!
Eat me!
Today we are ranking the albums of Static X, and we are starting right from the top with Wisconsin Death Trip in 1999. Now, I don't want to completely blow my wad on the first album, but if I were to recommend only one Static X album, this would be the one. As a fan of both industrial metal and nu metal, this was like the perfect collision of those worlds, and also my introduction to Wayne's instantly recognizable syncopated vocals. Nobody else sounds quite like him, and we will miss him and his drip with that hair. So many great songs that are both catchy and aggressive, and of course you've got the classic Push It, which I can't even tell you how many times I've jammed along to. But also the equally infectious I'm Was Stupid, Fix, and Bled for Days. And I also like the kind of lower-key atmospheric tracks like Stem and The Trance is the Motion. Just an all-around good time and an instant classic if you ask me. I think I even put it in my top 10 nu metal albums of all time list. Lots of great memories with this one, so it is going to perfection. Next up is Machine in 2001. Get to the Gone is a great opener in the same vein as Push It. Permanence keeps the intensity while also stepping up the synth atmosphere, the latter being a consistent theme of this album, I would say. Black and White is a great single with a catchy chorus. I was re-listening to it again just before recording, and I just cannot get enough of that one. This is not an Otsego Undead or Total Ragers. Machine has that deeply infectious bass groove, and the sense of humor is still there within a bag, literally, apparently about taking a shit in a bag and throwing it out the tour bus window, as apparently you're wont to do. Now, I've never cared for Cold with the corny whisper vocals and more melodic focus that unfortunately would begin a bit of a trend moving forwards, and also not a big fan of Burn to Burn either. Notably, Wayne wrote this album by himself on the tour bus, and when he said royalties would not be split evenly, Fukuda and Jay ended up leaving the band. I see a lot of people put this album up close to or even above the debut, but personally, I don't think it quite lives up to the same high bar. I'm still putting it at fantastic. Then we have Shadow Zone in 2003.
You follow your demonstration. You're trying to take me. You're trying to make me.
From here, the band continued to take a bit of a turn that I did not particularly love. Right from Destroy All, it feels like Wayne is going for more of a Jonathan Davis delivery on certain parts, which I think is such a shame because as much as I love Korn, we already have Korn. There was no one else really doing what Static X was doing, so why be someone else? The industrial elements are still front and center, but they feel much more diluted by the increased melodic elements and incorporation of what other bands were doing at the time. Control It, for instance, in many ways feels more like an orgy track with that synth line, while New Pain, The Only, and the title track feel like straight up Untouchables era Korn tracks, which had just come out the year before. This makes some sense in context, as Jonathan Davis had prior to this contacted Wayne about a number of other musicians to perform songs he had written for the Queen of the Damned soundtrack that he couldn't perform for legal reasons, and it seems like that experience may have rubbed off on this album. Not a great album, not a terrible album. I do kind of like Monster, but then there's So, which has no business being on any Static X album. Notably, Josh Freese of A Perfect Circle and Nine Inch Nails handled drumming on this one, which is kind of neat. I'm going to put it at good tier. Y'all, we have plenty more albums to go, but if you're enjoying the video, be sure to hit the like button. Comment your favorites and least favorites. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Subscribe for plenty more videos like this one if you're new here. But next up, we have Start a War in 2005. The Enemy feels like a welcome return to the Wisconsin Death Trip style verses, though it still has the more Korn-inspired choruses, and similar notes from many of these songs, like I Am the One, highly aggressive verses offset by slightly more balanced and pretty catchy choruses. There are a few that keep it heavy all the way through, like Start a War, Pieces, and Otsego Amigo, which are among my personal favorites, but the standout here is probably I Want to Fucking Break It, which has a pretty unique incorporation of a brass sample straight out of German Alpine folk music. Overall, this feels like an improvement from the last one, even if there is some filler, and I'm not a big fan of a few tracks on here like Just In Case, Set It Off, or My Damnation. I'm gonna put this one at great tier. Then we got Cannibal in 2007. I remember hearing this album in college after having not listened to the band in many years and being like, oh shit, they're good again. The title track is honestly my favorite single since the debut, and a fantastic way to open the album with that creepy synth intro and driving beat, super infectious. No Submission gets faster than they had in a long time, and that syncopated rhythm guitar on the verses is great, and those thrashier kind of Ministry sounding riffs also make an appearance on Chemical Logic. Love the weird vocal effects on that one too. Notably too, this is the first album since the debut with Fukuda actually back playing guitar on the album, so it kind of makes sense. Behemoth and Chromomatic both have memorable synth work and awesome groove. Destroyer is another banger single that's almost hypnotic. Cuts You Up is also fantastic with that weird sample or whatever it is on the verses. Honestly, there are no bad songs here, and if there is an album in their discography that comes closest to being a spiritual successor to Wisconsin Death Trip, I think this is the one. Just a really fun and satisfying listen that I would highly recommend. Easily one of my favorites here by a wide margin. Wayne actually said he considered this their heaviest and most metal album, and I think I agree. I'm putting it at perfection. Then we had Cult of Static in 2009.
Sing the song, still going on. Shadow of myself, I realize. My way, my side.
Not a ton to say about this one because I don't think it's very good. Lunatic is a solid enough opener with sort of an early Ministry vibe and features a solo from Dave Mustaine. But right from the beginning it also feels off in terms of production, just very flat and stripped back sounding. Same goes for Z28 and Nocturnally. They get my head bobbing, but there's just no soul to it. I'm not a huge fan of Terminal and Hypure, which are so dull they put me to sleep until they blast me with the way too loud in the mix solos. Terrafiend and UMI aren't great either, but at least they're kind of different and interesting, I guess. But yeah, this is probably my least favorite overall at OK tier. Unfortunately, Wayne passed away after that, but next up is Project Regeneration Volume 1 in 2020.
You want it, you need it, you got it, you got it.
This is their first album in 11 years and released 6 years after Wayne's death, but is largely made up of vocal tracks he had recorded prior to his passing. This also sees the return of the original lineup, including contributions from guitarist Trip Eisen. I was on the fence about this, especially since Wayne was estranged from the rest of the band prior to his death, and as cool as that new cyborg costume is, I can't help but feel like it's someone wearing Wayne's skin and parading it around on stage for profit.
Silence of the Lambs.
That said, I was pleasantly surprised by this album, and everyone I've heard from in the audience of those live shows have been saying that it feels like a very respectful celebration. Solid representation of their better moments. I was banging my head throughout this thing, especially for Hollow, Accelerate, My Destruction, and Follow. Terminator Oscillator has the perfect fusion of the Prodigy-esque EDM with chuggy guitars, and Al Jorgensen of Ministry shows up on closing track Dead Souls. There are some like Worth Dying For and Bring You Down that feel like slapping a new paint job on an actual retread of previous material, but even these end up feeling like at least enjoyable B-sides. I was genuinely impressed with this album. Like, I did not have high expectations when I listened to it the first time, and it ended up surprising me quite a bit, to the point that I would actually put it all the way up at fantastic. And now we have Project Regeneration Volume 2 in 2024. Following up in a similar vein as Volume 2, to the point that it was even recommended that Part 1 and Part 2 be listened to together. Stay Alive makes for a bittersweet opener in that it still brings that fun, classic-era energy, while the title and lyrics are a little bit morbid in context. Black Star has a nice mix of the usual hypnotic grooves with a more melodic chorus with plenty layering of the synth effects, while true to its name, Kamikaze and Run For Your Life are super aggro and would have been right at home on Wisconsin Death Trip or Cannibal. Then you've got Take Control that frequently sounds like a mashup of Rob Zombie and Korn. There are some tracks here and there I don't care for, like Tone, Dark Place, and From Heaven. They just feel a little bit clunkier and out of place. I'm not a big fan of the bonus cover either. As you might have noticed, I love Nine Inch Nails and Pretty Hate Machine, but this version of Terrible Lie.
This ain't it.
Overall, I'd say this is almost as good as Part 1, but has a less consistent runtime. Definitely some filler, but I get that this is reportedly the last remaining material left from Wayne, so they probably just didn't want to hold anything back. I'm just happy as a fan that I got an opportunity to hear this stuff and have it come out as good as it did, as somebody who's just listened to this band and to Wayne for so many years at this point. We're talking like 20 years. And with the vault now supposedly empty, it'll be interesting to see where the band decides to go from here. But I am putting this album at great tier. Y'all check out this playlist for more new metal videos and rankings, or you can check out this one for my industrial metal band rankings. Let me know again down in the comments, what are your favorites, least favorites? Let's get a discussion going, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.